Standover man, underworld executioner and inventive raconteur, Mark Chopper Read was Australia's most infamous criminal. America had Al Capone, England had the Kray brothers, and Australia, proving once and for all its Antipodean sense of humour, has Mark Chopper Read. I saw this film at the cinema when it came out in the year 2000. Chopper, starring Eric Bana, directed and written by Andrew Dominik, is without a shadow of a doubt, I think, the funniest Australian film ever made. It's the Dr. Strangelove of Australian cinema, with elements of dark tragicomedy and a utilisation of tone and speech patterns that could only be found in Melbourne, Australia. Not a lot of people outside of Australia know this, but before Eric Bana went to Hollywood to play the Hulk and appear in Troy and Munich, he was one of Australia's greatest comedians in the 1990s. And the film showcases just how good his comedic talents for mimicry and impersonation really are, completely and accurately embodying the mannerisms and vocal tones of Chopper like a counterfeit Swiss watch. I think Eric Bana is as good at portraying Chopper as Philip Seymour Hoffman was at portraying Truman Capote in the 2005 film Capote. To get a sense of who Chopper Read was for those who don't know, here is a short clip from a very infamous interview he did back in the 1990s, playing Russian roulette with a news journalist right after he'd moved from Victoria to Tasmania because of their less stringent gun ownership laws.
Ladies and gentlemen, there's a slug in this gun. Now, you've got to take my word for it, but there's a slug in this gun. Well, I want one shot to my head. One shot to Renee's. Are you ready, Renee?
I don't think I want to play.
Are you ready? You don't want to play. Bad luck.
Chopper Read, spelled R-E-A-D, was the son of a devoutly religious mother and a one-time soldier father with a fondness for sleeping alongside his loaded gun. Chopper dreamed of making a name for himself as a legendary crime figure. However, his journey leans more towards absurdity. As a young Melbourne standover man, Chopper had been in and out of jail since the age of 16 to escape a domineering father and repay a debt to his best friend, Jimmy Luffnut. He attempted to kidnap a judge using a gun loaded with blanks, ostensibly to effect Jimmy's release from the notorious maximum security H Division at Melbourne's Pentridge Prison. Receiving a 16.5-year sentence for his bungled judge-snatching efforts and reuniting with Jimmy in H Division, Chopper attempts to reassert himself by reigniting a power struggle for the notorious division, a tactic that wins few admirers. Most scathing of his critics is Keithy George, a hardened criminal who rules H Division. George dismisses Chopper as a mere show pony, then soon after is fatally stabbed by Chopper in a fit of rage that surprises even his prison buddies, Jimmy and Bluey. Justifying his increasingly erratic behaviour with a series of lies, rationalizations and distortions, Chopper is finally attacked by his own crew and stabbed by Jimmy, who is torn by their deep friendship yet driven by his own need to survive. Recovered from the assault but fearing further retribution, Chopper persuades a fellow inmate to slice off his ears to effect a transfer from H Division, an act which grows his notoriety in the imagination of a public both repulsed and fascinated by this seemingly fearless felon. In 1984, 8 years later, Chopper is released, a walking anachronism driven by resentment and guilt, searching desperately for his hidden enemies, unable to differentiate between fact and fiction. His body and psyche bear the scars of one too many internal and external battles. Chopper attempts a reconciliation with his ex-girlfriend Tanya, a hooker with a taste for amphetamines. Suspicious that Tanya is involved with Melbourne Western Suburbs drug king Neville Bartos, Chopper pays Neville an unexpected home visit demanding cash. When Neville doesn't oblige, Chopper shoots him and then proceeds to take the bleeding Neville to the hospital. Informed that he is now the target of a contract put out by the mafia, who Chopper dismisses as fruit sellers and fairies, Chopper visits Jimmy only to find him ravaged by years of drug abuse and failure, with 2 children and another on the way to his junkie fiancée, Mandy. Despite the echo of their former friendship, both suspect the other's motives and Chopper leaves. At Bojangles nightclub, in a fit of paranoia, he kills a minor criminal known as Sammy the Turk, but manages to beat the charge by virtue of his now well-honed storytelling abilities. Charged for another offence not long after, he returns to jail, where he later writes an exaggerated account of his life and crimes. His book becomes a national bestseller, and Chopper's original ambition is realised. He emerges a cult figure with a reputation as Australia's #1 hitman. He is now without doubt Australia's most notorious ex-criminal, with a cult status not unlike that accorded to Ned Kelly. There are so many great snippets of funny dialogue in this film, and one of the funniest sequences to me is the first Bojangles nightclub scene, where he confronts Neville Bartos for the first time. Particularly, the dialogue and speech patterns in this scene really stand out. When Tracy asks for a Marsala and Coke, Neville repeats it back to her, happy with her choice of drink. But it's the way he says it, the inflection of tone, that is so hilarious. This type of speech inflection is classic Italian, Greek, Australian from the 80s, and enacted perfectly here. After Chopper despicably punches Tracy in a way that the camera is so disgusted at, it can't even look at it. He takes stock of the situation, turning the blame for his actions to Tracy, even blaming her for upsetting her own mother. And the way that Eric Bana delivers this line, which I think was ad-libbed, is so perfect and fitting, it could only ever be delivered that way by a natural comedian.
Giddy! Giddy, Tanya! Have a look what you've done. Have a look what you've gone and done. Your mum's upset.
The comedy of the film for me is a 10. There's really no other film like this, particularly in Australia, and the degree to which the screenwriter Andrew Dominik captured the dialogue of how the 80s criminal class of Melbourne speak is really profound, and finds humour in places that people never have before.
Cash.
There's no cash here. Here, there's no cash, all right? Cash, no. Robbo?
No cash.
In summary, the film is an entertaining and comedic take on a cautionary tale about what happens when the desire for notoriety, mental illness, and public fascination collide. And no matter how charming or rich and famous a person is, at the end of the day, we're all alone, with it being better on the outside of a prison looking in, rather than being on the inside of a prison looking out.
Hi, Chazzy! See you, Chazzy! Take Mummy to bed.